So there's another impact. So we talked about that's one impact that we're seeing on AI, the kind of regulatory, and then there's the entire other end of the spectrum. You found an article, I think it was on CNBC, about tech layoffs, and it's not like they weren't completely placing the blame at AI, but if you read between the lines, clearly a lot of focus or shift around it. Probably the most shocking thing in this article, I think it was CNBC, from my standpoint, was that one of the people, because they like profiled a bunch of people that have been laid off or whatever. One of them was a data scientist. I mean, wasn't it just like a year and a half ago that we were saying data scientist was the job that you
Yes, the
needed?
sexiest job of the 21st century. Yeah.
And now here we are. So I was curious what your read on that article was and why you picked it out, particularly from an enterprise perspective, what your read on it was.
Yeah. So I've got to be like, when I look at the world in general, I see we still have a lot of problems, and that technology can solve. I feel like platforms still have so far to go in general, even to make work more efficient and more effective, much less solve larger societal problems or cultural problems, even just stuff like a closed supply chain, and all sorts of different issues that exist. And looking at all the challenges that exist in the world and thinking that the answer is we are going to get rid of the developers and technicians and educators who are helping with this in our company, uh, to increase short-term profits seems very short-sighted to me. And I feel like that is happening across the board from a tech perspective. So I feel like what's happening now isn't really an AI issue. This is really more of a financial issue, going back to what I learned in my MBA days, around a very tightly managed company that improves the bottom line. Everybody wants to improve the bottom line right now, and I feel like it's this is going to be an era. This is going to be an era that defines like long-term winners versus long-term losers, and it feels to me to some extent like previous um, economic downturns and recessions. We're not in a recession, but we are doing the layoff aspect of the recession, where people who laid off too much, like back in 2008, 2009, never really recovered. And I'm
Well, I
worried we're
think
going in that direction.
yeah, I mean, I have a few different reads on this, I guess. The first is I think that to a certain extent, here's what I find interesting. Every single one of these companies has gone through layoffs. They're also hiring, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not like these are not
Right.
contractions that are happening. And I think we saw through the pandemic, the tech industry, the high tech industry, right? Tech companies went through this explosive and I would argue irresponsible hiring rampages, right? They were just hiring anybody they possibly could
Mm-hmm.
to try to meet up all this sort of demand that was spurred on by the pandemic. And I think, you know, obviously I'm sure there's a lot of variance and nuance in all of this, but I think to a certain extent what you're seeing is a realignment. Is they're realizing that they hired in some of the wrong places, they hired in areas or overhired in domains that they don't need. They've now underhired because then we came out of that and the AI storm hit and everyone's going, oh gosh, we need that. We need to reallocate. There is, there's been these recessionary pressures. So everyone's been under financial constraint where it's
Mm-hmm.
this move to it's no longer growth that is the big driver. It's about profitability. And so, I mean, well, obviously growth is still important. You're sort of seeing all of that. And I think that in the grand scheme of things, it's the same message. I know I talked to my sons about this, that because two of them, two of my kids are in tech. It's a tech is
Mm-hmm.
a tough space because at least if you're technically oriented, really across the board, because it's changing so fast that you need to constantly have a your thumb on the pulse of where it's going and continually be updating your skill sets around where it's going. I remember people used to ask me, it's like, why are you teaching everything you know? It's like because what I know is yesterday's news. What's what I'm
Yeah.
learning that you should be paying attention to, because that's where it's always going. And I think that there's a lot of people that got into tech in this explosive period and sort of missed that chapter, of an MBA class. It's saying, that it's about this continuous state of motion. I will say this, I think for the traditional enterprise, where they are mostly in a growth state now from a technology perspective.
Mhm.
There's some opportunities here to pick up some talent that has some of that tech company experience and bring them in house. The interesting thing about the article is that there's a lot of downward pressure on wage expectations. So I think this is
Yes.
an opportunity for traditional enterprises to maybe pick up some short-term wins there. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, I feel like there's a huge amount of opportunity there, but honestly, there will be some pay cuts involved. The likes of Meta and Google and Microsoft and Amazon were hoarding, probably 100,000 extra tech people that they may or may not have actually needed. But honestly, they were all world-class technologists. They just need to go to the places that need technology. And honestly, a lot of those are going to pay half of what big tech paid. But to the average human, to the average worker, hearing somebody taking a paycheck from 400,000, cut from 400,000 to 200,000, isn't going to get that many tears. It is something that we're used to in the tech world, obviously. But I think for those who are able to take cuts, there's an opportunity to do a lot of interesting work out there, whether it be in healthcare or with nonprofits or with other types of organizations that desperately need to improve their data strategy, their analytics, their AI, their networking, across the board. They need technical help.
Yeah, so I think that it's I think there's gonna definitely be some rude awakenings. I think there's gonna be some probably well needed realignment. But in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it represents, it's really hard. I hate to be super macro. I think in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't represent any major issue. I think this is just sort of a byproduct of what's gone on. Obviously, for the people impacted, it's a horrible thing, and it's a very difficult time. But there will definitely be some realignment. And what I will say, one other thing, little minor observation: um,
Mhm.
almost everyone they quoted in there is a remote worker. These people that had
Mhm.
these jobs and moved into these small towns someplace and are now having trouble. And I do think that speaks to this sort of ongoing realignment that we're seeing of back to the office. And I don't remember who it was, but I didn't share this one. Uh, but some one of the tech companies basically said, yes, you can continue to work remotely, but don't expect to be promoted, which I thought was really this
Mhm.
sort of interesting thing. So I think there's also that sort of underlying element of it. So we'll see.